I can't believe I'm even writing this. It sounds like a nightmare, and in some ways, it turned out to be one. I'm 41, and my wife Michelle is 38. We've been married for nearly 20 years and have a son, Daniel, who just graduated from high school. That day started as any other, and it was supposed to be a huge milestone for all of us. A day of pride, family, and celebration for us, but also for our guests. But that day turned into something I can barely bring myself to speak about aloud. I'll start from the beginning. About a week and a half ago, Michelle and I attended Daniel's official graduation ceremony. It was a big event for the school, with hundreds of parents, students, and staff gathered in the school hall. I must admit, seeing Daniel walk across the stage to receive his diploma, I felt a pride I hadn't felt in a long time. He is our only child, and we've poured all our energy into raising him right. He's popular, smart, and has his whole life ahead of him. After the ceremony, Michelle and I mingled with other parents. Since Daniel was one of the most sociable kids in the class, over the years, we had gotten to know many of his friends and their families quite well. Most of them respected us, perhaps because I've succeeded in my career as a real estate entrepreneur. This has given us a comfortable life, and we've never held back when it came to supporting our son and his circle of friends. That day, while we were chatting, the idea of hosting a graduation party came up. Several parents mentioned that their kids hoped for a bigger, more memorable celebration after the official ceremony. They wanted more than just a gathering. They wanted something that felt like a real send-off, something to mark the end of an era. Since we were already on friendly terms with these families, the idea quickly evolved from a casual conversation into an actual plan. By the time we left, I offered our cottage as the venue. It seemed like the perfect place. Our cottage is one of those spots people love, a spacious property with 4 bedrooms, a large backyard pool, a sauna, and even a small pool in the sauna area. I had rented it out for private events and gatherings before, so I knew how to host a big party there. Besides, I was thrilled to be able to offer Daniel and his friends a special place to celebrate. Once we got to work, I took charge of the organizing. Event planning is nothing new to me, and I don't mind putting in the effort. I wanted everything to go smoothly. We scheduled the party for a week later, giving everyone enough time to adjust their schedules. I contacted all the families involved, coordinating details so everyone knew when and where to be. Michelle helped a bit with the invitations, making sure everyone received the necessary information, but most of the heavy lifting was on me. The day before the party, everything was set. I managed the catering orders, organized all the food and drinks, and coordinated the schedule with everyone attending. We planned for the party to start around noon and last until the next morning, giving the kids plenty of time to relax, celebrate, and create memories. By 2 p.m. on the day of the party, the first guests started arriving, filling the house with energy and excitement. Looking back now, it's hard to believe how normal everything seemed at first. I remember thinking that this was exactly what I had hoped for, a day filled with laughter, fun, and pride. The day started off exactly as I'd planned, and by 6 o'clock, we had a full house. 10 families had come to celebrate, each bringing their own unique energy to the party. I won't bore you with every little detail of who was there. There were a lot of people and a lot of chatter, but there were a few guests that would stand out by the end of the night. First, there was the Martin family. William Martin, the father, and his daughter Margot were longtime acquaintances of ours. William's a bit of a character, the type who loves to be at the center of attention, with a booming laugh that could fill the entire room. He and his daughter arrived early, and he greeted everyone with his usual charisma, immediately raising the energy in the place. Then there was James, a single father with his son Brad, who was one of Daniel's good friends. James is the quiet type, a good-natured guy who keeps to himself but is there when you need him. Lastly, there was Leo, father to Daniel's best friend. Leo had a reputation for being a bit unpredictable when he drank, but he'd always been respectful around me and Michelle. I figured he'd behave himself since this was a family event. Michelle, Daniel, and I spent a good portion of the afternoon preparing food on the grill for all the guests. Burgers, hot dogs, a few kebabs, enough to feed everyone twice over. It felt good having the whole family working together, getting everything set up. My son's friends had brought a few coolers full of drinks with them, which I was fine with, as long as they kept things under control. I gave Daniel a quiet warning, though. just to remind him that if he and his friends overdid it, there'd be consequences. He nodded, looking a bit sheepish but responsible enough to understand. I trusted him. At least, I thought I did. When the food was ready, everyone moved to the terrace, where I'd set up a massive table for the gathering. It was a beautiful setup, with a spread that practically glowed in the late afternoon sunlight. People ate, drank, and laughed, savoring the joy of the occasion. I even brought out a few bottles of good whiskey I'd been saving for a special day like this, something I didn't do often. But hey, it was my son's graduation. The afternoon rolled into evening, and everyone was in high spirits. The alcohol was flowing, and while most people kept it to a respectable level, some started to loosen up a little more than they should have. William, the loud one, was telling his usual string of half-crude, half-hilarious jokes, keeping the table laughing. But Leo, who had been quiet at first, was starting to get louder. He'd had more than a few drinks by this point and was teetering between funny and borderline offensive. Then, at one point, Leo leaned over, looking at Michelle, and made some joke I won't repeat here. It was crude, rude, and made the table go quiet for a moment. Michelle looked away, embarrassed, and I felt this flash of anger that I hadn't felt in a long time. I'm generally a patient guy, but I wasn't about to let someone talk like that to my wife, even if he was drunk. I put my hand on his shoulder, trying to keep things calm and under control, and suggested we take a quick walk into the house for a private chat. Leo blinked, probably realizing he'd gone too far, and nodded. We stood up, and I led him into the living room, away from the others. Inside, I kept my voice low but firm. Leo, I get that you're having fun, but you can't talk to my wife like that. I know you've had a bit to drink, but there are limits, especially in my house. He nodded, looking embarrassed, and muttered an apology. I didn't mean it like that, man. It just slipped out, I swear. No disrespect, really. I took a deep breath and let it go. We'd known each other for years, and I knew he was generally a decent guy. All right, I told him, but let's keep it together. No more of that, okay? He agreed, and we rejoined the others, who were laughing and talking as if nothing had happened. The tension lifted a little, and things returned to the light-hearted atmosphere we'd had before. As the night went on, I spent some time chatting with other parents, sharing stories, and reflecting on our kids growing up and moving on to college. Everything felt almost perfect, like we were living out a moment that would turn into a good memory. But the comfort I felt that evening was only an illusion. What I didn't know was that, as I was clinking glasses and talking about the future of my family was about to unravel in the worst possible way. The unease from Leo's earlier comment to Michelle hadn't fully left me. Even though he'd apologized, the energy around the party felt different, like an underlying tension that wouldn't shake. I figured some fresh air might help me clear my head. Besides, I wanted to make sure Leo didn't get himself into any more trouble. I gathered everyone's attention and said, "Hey, I'm heading out to grab some more snacks and drinks. Also, I'll pick up some stomach meds and stuff for anyone who might need it later." As I looked over the group, I noticed Michelle rubbing her temple, wincing like she had a headache. I went over and asked if she needed anything specific. She just waved her hand, her expression distant. "No, I'm fine," she muttered, looking tired. Something about her tone seemed off, like she was halfway here and halfway somewhere else. With a final glance, I grabbed Leo by the arm. "Come on," I said. "I could use some help carrying everything." Leo seemed surprised, but shrugged, agreeing to come along. It would also give him time to sober up a bit. I was the only one who hadn't been drinking, so I was fine to drive us to the store and back. The drive gave me and Leo a chance to talk a bit more, and we actually had a decent conversation. He apologized again for his comment, saying the alcohol must have loosened his tongue more than he intended. I accepted his apology, but I made it clear that kind of behavior wouldn't fly. By the time we pulled back into the cottage's driveway an hour later, things felt more relaxed between us, like maybe we could put the awkwardness behind us. But as soon as we got out of the car, I noticed something strange. The terrace, which had been full of people an hour ago, was completely deserted. Plates and drinks were scattered around, and the place looked like a scene out of a movie where people had just vanished mid-celebration. I frowned, feeling a weird sense of déjà vu. like I'd walked into the wrong house. Where'd everyone go? Leo asked, looking around. Good question, I muttered. I figured I'd start with Daniel. Maybe he knew where the party had moved. I headed toward the backyard pool, where the kids had been hanging out earlier. Sure enough, Daniel and his friends were still there, splashing around and laughing, oblivious to the quiet that had taken over the terrace. I walked over to Daniel, who looked up, surprised to see me. Hey, Dad, you're back already? Yeah, I replied, my voice casual but my mind racing. Where'd your mom and everyone else go? Daniel pointed towards the house, shrugging. They all went to the indoor pool area. Mom asked me to throw some wood in the sauna for them. That gave me pause. I'd thought everyone would be out on the terrace for most of the night. The pool and sauna area wasn't meant for big groups. It was more private, more enclosed. But I brushed off my concerns and thanked Daniel, figuring maybe they'd just decided to move indoors as the evening cooled off. Leo and I headed toward the pool house, laughing over some joke he made, easing back into a light mood as we walked inside. We descended the stairs to the basement level, where the indoor pool and sauna were located, but the moment I stepped in, I felt like I'd crossed into an entirely different world. The sounds hit me first, low murmurs, laughter, a strange mix of voices coming from beyond the door. As we moved closer, I heard voices that didn't quite sound like relaxed conversation. They were too loud, too chaotic, mixed with laughter that was off. My pulse quickened as I pushed open the door. What I saw made the world feel like it was spinning out from under me. There, in the dim lights around the pool, was a sight I never thought I'd see in my own home. Michelle, my wife, was in the middle of an unspeakable scene, surrounded by multiple people, tangled in a mess of bodies that made my stomach turn. In one corner, I spotted William with his daughter Margot, oblivious to the world around them. My mind couldn't process it. These were the people I'd invited to celebrate my son's graduation, people I'd shared drinks with, laughed with, my wife, my friends, our community. And here they were, completely out of control, lost to some kind of primal instinct that I couldn't understand. Leo, beside me, stood frozen, his face twisted with shock and rage. Before I knew it, he lunged toward one of the men, throwing punches in a fit of anger. The man barely responded, like he was too out of it to even feel pain. And that's when it hit me. Something more was going on here. These people didn't seem like they were fully aware of what they were doing. Their eyes were glassy, their movements erratic, almost robotic, as if they were under some kind of influence. And then, as I looked around the room, I spotted Brad, James's son, standing in the corner with an empty bottle in his hand, his expression dazed. In a flash, everything started making a sick kind of sense. Brad was known to have a bit of a wild streak, and I realized he must have brought something stronger than just alcohol to the party. The bottle he held, something about it made me think it wasn't just a simple drink. A mix of dread and fury surged through me as I put the pieces together. I grabbed Leo, pulling him back as he raged, and managed to drag him out of the room. We stormed back to the main part of the house, where we found Brad, who looked pale and jittery, like he knew he'd done something he couldn't take back. I cornered him, my voice low and furious. What the hell did you bring here, Brad? At first, he stammered, trying to deny it, but under the weight of my glare, he finally broke. He confessed that he'd slipped something into one of the drinks, something he thought would just loosen people up. He'd originally intended to give it to Margot, William's daughter, hoping it'd make her more open to his advances. But somehow, that drink had ended up in the cooler everyone was sharing, and things had spiraled from there. The sick feeling in my gut grew as I realized the full extent of what had happened. Brad's reckless decision had led to the absolute breakdown of everything we'd gathered to celebrate. He'd unleashed chaos on the people I cared about, and I had no words for the devastation I felt. I walked out of the house, leaving everyone behind, my wife, my son, the guests. I couldn't bear to look at any of them, not after what I'd seen, not after knowing the role my family had played in this disaster. In the days that followed, I packed a bag and left, needing space and time to clear my head. I don't know what the future holds for my marriage, my family, or any of the relationships that were shattered that night. All I know is that the trust one had in my wife, my son, and the people I thought were my friends had been destroyed, replaced by a hollow feeling I don't know if I can ever feel again.